Hey, welcome to the Regenerative podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates, for the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Raina Morel. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, and maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hey Jennifer, welcome to the Regenerative podcast. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm really well. Sorry for anyone listening, I'm giggling because we've just been having a little few technical sound issues, which is always fun and always happens on the day. But I'm really delighted to welcome Jennifer Koster to the show, and we're going to be talking about all things built environment, regenerative communities. But Jennifer is an absolute serial entrepreneur with a hugely diverse background, spanning from management consulting to construction, tech startups, launching her own mobile startup and owning and operating kind of residential construction. However, in latter years, your focus really, and you do have a huge leading voice in the world of the built environment, what that means, because for a lot of people, you're like, the built environment, for sustainability, circularity, and obviously that transition that we all hear talked about into net zero. So thank you so much. You do all of this, of course, through WerkWell and various other entities, but thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
So much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome. Keep leaning forward as well, just in case we lose you that little bit.
Technical difficulties, always something, isn't it?
I know. How many times have we spoken before? Never been a problem.
No.
But listen, Jennifer, for those who don't really understand, what do you mean when you talk about the built environment or transitioning to net zero?
Yeah, so essentially, the built environment is buildings. It's every structure that we're living within and every structure that we're working within. And, it is maybe unbeknownst to most people that construction is actually a massive contributor to our climate issue. I believe the last stats that I heard were that construction is responsible for 1/3 of our global waste, which is of course significant. Roughly 40% of carbon emissions are caused by buildings, both residential and commercial. And it's a challenging space. It's also kind of an archaic space. I actually came from a tech background and went into construction and built a name for myself by being one of few residential home builders that really applied technology in this space. But it's a very kind of dinosaur industry. I joke about, contractors that are still paper contractors who still do their estimating by paper, their invoicing by paper. And that's very much the environment that we're in, especially on the residential side. On the commercial side, it's a little bit different. So with that, of course, comes some very real challenges of addressing this climate issue, because we're, I say we being the construction industry, we're the biggest contributors. And trying to move that engine towards actually solving the problem, one, reducing our waste, two, reducing our emissions, is a massive undertaking. And so I have, I'm very passionate about the environment. I'm very passionate about animals. I'm very passionate about leaving my children a place to live once I leave here. Hopefully in many, many years from now. But it's a challenge that we really need to address. And so I have shifted my company. At WerkWell, the original version of WerkWell was really sort of still in that old world construction space of guiding projects from concept through completion. So what we did was more construction services, construction management. And as we were doing more and more projects in Europe, it was becoming very critical, this transition to net zero. And more we were being asked, well, how do we do that? What does that mean? What does that include? What does it cost? And so we have, over the last couple of years, built a core competency in actually helping really transition buildings. And essentially what that means is, especially in Europe, you have a lot of these, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s buildings where they've been built in a way that's there's often no insulation. If you're lucky, there's some insulation that was put in at some point. And there generally hasn't been a lot of thought given to how we build, what materials we use, and creating efficiency in the buildings. It was really, we need buildings and we need homes, and this is what the market demands, and this is kind of what that looks like and what the market can afford, and that's how it was designed. And now we have this global challenge of essentially undoing that, both in our existing built environment of trying to get buildings to be more efficient, be able to retain heat and cold better, and use less energy, but also in the whole way that we design new buildings and new construction, and what does that look like and what does that entail. So we've really taken this path of becoming experts in understanding what does that mean, but also looking at every aspect of sustainable materials. So what are there materials that we can use that are less impactful on the environment, in every capacity, from how they're produced to how they're delivered to the distance that they have to go, as well as the circularity aspect of really looking at how can we reuse materials from buildings and from existing constructions back into new construction, whether it's in the exact same form as they are or in a different capacity. So that's sort of what we mean by this whole sustainability, circularity, and net zero is essentially a term that's used to identify a building that's not creating emissions. And it's in this environment that we're in, where there's the majority of our constructed environment is what you'd call existing buildings that have been built in the old way without any consideration for any environmental impacts. It's try to undo that and arrive at a place where we're really not emitting more than.
Oh, the sound's gone again, Jennifer. Can you just repeat that last sentence?
Yeah, so in our sorry about that, but so in our projects, we're really actually trying to move beyond net zero, because net zero in our mind, with the scale of the problem, isn't enough.
No, absolutely. Well, what if there was ever a sentence to kind of be repeated, that was it, I guess. And so often we talk about theories and what it means. Can you bring to life an example of where you may have deconstructed or used construction waste? What have you done with it? How have you kind of been able to repurpose it?
So there's a lot of discussion about circularity right now, and I'll kind of define what that is first, because there's a lot of discussion around it. There's also a very big focus on end of life circularity, which is essentially designing buildings today so that they're circular tomorrow, except that tomorrow isn't really tomorrow. If you're designing a building properly, tomorrow is 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now. What we're doing on the circularity side is saying, okay, if you're deconstructing a building, how can we actually repurpose and reuse as much of the material from that building as possible? So what we actually did is we partnered with a company who is a specialist in this. They've been doing it for 20 years. And we are building platforms in Europe and the US where we can construct a building, create a training on what that means and what that looks like, and how do you repurpose the different materials, and borrow their expertise and their patented solutions to recreate new products from that. So at the most simple form, if you take a concrete building, for example, you'll have concrete and steel mixed together with all sorts of other materials. We will separate the concrete and steel and separate that from the other materials. For example, I'm not sure what you call it in the UK, but gypsum board or drywall, which is, poison for concrete. And we'll separate that away, and then we'll reprocess the separated concrete and steel materials. That concrete can become a number of different things. So the most common that people are doing is they're recycling the concrete into an aggregate, which is basically crushing it. So you're taking the old concrete, you're crushing it down, creating little finer pebbles, which can be different sizes, and different sizes are used for different things. And the most common use is that it's used as road base for new roads. We're taking it a step further with our partner, who has actually created a solution to return concrete into concrete paste, which is basically recreating concrete out of concrete. So that is true circularity. That is truly taking a product and bringing it fully back to life. The numbers we're able to achieve is up to 98% circularity, which is why we actually became so aligned with this partner, because we have not found anyone else in the world that's able to do that at that scale and across so many different material types. So the materials that we are looking at range from soil, dirt, to concrete, to asbestos, for example. So we're really trying to push the envelope of what's possible. And luckily we have, through our partner, a team of scientists and engineers that are really specialists in this area to create solutions out of these materials.
I guess that's an interesting point, isn't it? Designing circularity for what will be in 50 years' time, we hope will be a wonderful place. But obviously, you just don't know, essentially, I guess. And I think
the problem now, that's the biggest challenge. It's not fixing the problem we have now. Now we have overwhelming construction waste, we have overwhelming CO2 emissions, and we have an overwhelming need for raw materials to serve our construction demand. So, just another interesting stat, 50% of the world's raw materials that are extracted are used in construction. So if we can put a dent in that and decrease that, maybe we can tip the scale a little bit and be better at reusing and repurposing what we've already extracted.
Yeah, and I guess with that, it's going to come around kind of maybe legislation and pricing, because obviously it's easy for me to come along and bulldoze next door's house and just go and shove it all in a tip, but actually to physically extract, it's like recycling the home and splitting it all up, is going to come, of course, at a price. But if we put the right, I guess, financial support, a bit like how we do subsidies, is that something that's being talked about around subsidizing construction that is using waste?
Yes, for sure. It's obviously different in every place that you operate, which makes it quite interesting for us to navigate. But there are subsidies, there are loans, there are grants. For the European projects, there's a lot of EU funding that's going into these types of initiatives. It's cumbersome to apply, but they're quite happy to provide the funds for these projects, which is a good thing. So yes, there are these initiatives, and there are, we have a project, as I mentioned, in Los Angeles, where we're trying to get a pilot off the ground to basically take what's been done in Europe and bring it there. We're hoping that will be sort of an interesting funding collaboration between the city, the state, and some local investment from an incubator. So we're developing that right now, and then from there, we hope to remonetize the material that we've extracted as well, which has been the model that we've applied. It's not just it's basically financing the cost of the processing, and then we sell it to a third party for reuse.
Yeah, so I guess essentially what you're trying to do then is looking at different economic models, be that in the US or Europe or Indonesia, wherever that might be, to look at the impacts and the current infrastructure, I guess, for waste management, how we can use And one of the things that I know I'd spoken to you about as well is we in the past we talked about, we've got this situation where we need to retrofit buildings. Equally, we've got the Global South that need to start on their journey to build these homes and infrastructures and etc. So what really excited me about some of the things you were doing was what it meant to build regenerative communities. So knowing what we know now and giving them the same opportunities of security, warmth, be that access to water, all these sorts of things. Describe to me and the listeners a little bit more about what you mean about a regenerative community. What does it look like? Paint a picture for us.
Yeah, sure. So I have been, this is not a new thing. This is a rebirthed concept that I had living in California many, many years ago, of really trying to think differently about how we live. So it started as, and this is a very North American perspective. I'm actually Canadian, but very North American perspective, and of, how can we downsize the houses that we're living in? Because of course, the bigger the house you have, the more energy you use, et cetera, and take out all the unnecessary square footage from a home, and then create more community spaces that can be shared, that can be used as they're needed. Because in the US, I think certainly everyone that I grew up with had a formal dining room. They had a formal living room. They had a family room, which was your TV room. You had a kitchen there. Some people had two kitchens, or a butler's kitchen, or this kitchen. And I thought, it's most people really don't need that space. It's a nice to have when you need it, but we use it holidays, maybe 2-3 times a year. Same thing with guest rooms. So the original idea was to actually build more sustainable communities where you take all the unnecessary square footage out of things. As things started really evolving over the last few years in the world, basically, and all these different concerns, COVID was a big moment for me, of going into the grocery store at the time I was living in Los Angeles and realizing, wow, we have a real problem if we can't go to the store and buy food. And what does that look like on a global level? And what does that look like from a perspective of how do we live in the future? And so I started sort of playing with this idea. Then when I moved to Europe during COVID, which was an interesting adventure, I really, I moved to the Netherlands, which is obviously a very forward-thinking country from an agricultural perspective and from an ag tech perspective. And I really started revisiting this community concept as, well, what if you could actually create food security, energy security, and housing security in one central place? And what does that look like? And what is the scale that it needs to be at? And what are the requirements? And to my delight, found that there were a number of different versions of that, from communes and eco-villages to intentional communities to the sustainable city in Dubai or Neom or Masdar or any of these communities, cities that have done this. And I realized that we have an interesting opportunity to kill a few birds with one stone, if you will. One is to try to regenerate our land and actually bring back the capacity of the land to retain water and then become farmland again, and be used agriculturally or for nature preservation or green space, et cetera. The second is to look at rural areas that are undeveloped, where they don't have as many of the challenges that we have, where you've got this set structured urban zone, and now you can actually kind of have a blank slate. And the third was, which is a very important thing to me, is how do we actually balance the socioeconomic situation of, removing the barrier that, if you make this amount of money, you can live here. If you make that amount of money, well, sorry, but you're over there. And change that dynamic by thinking of communities as more of a corporation type of concept, where you can actually generate revenue from the agriculture, but it also supports and feeds your local residents, and also from the energy side. So when I say regenerative community, it's really this careful union of agriculture, energy, and residential and light commercial land uses in one place, where there isn't necessarily a need to go elsewhere. Of course, you're free to go elsewhere, but there isn't this, oh, I have to go here to go get groceries. I have to go here to go do this. I have to send my kids to school over here. And this is one of the things some of these larger cities have done really well. They've managed to contain everything in one place. And what I've learned in all of my discussions with all of these wonderful people that have gone on this journey before me and are continuing, is that when you build the right thing, people don't want to leave. And if you create enough amenities where they don't feel like they're missing something, they don't want to leave. And it was interesting for me also, just in my own personal experience, coming from Los Angeles, where, the US is generally this very convenient Angeles, you have to drive everywhere, but everything is available. You can get anything, anytime, what you want, doesn't matter what time of day, it's available. Coming to a small town in the Netherlands where that was completely not the case, but finding how much more peaceful and relaxed we were as a family, being able to walk down the street and go to the little shopping street, being able to walk to the park and walk to the beach and walk to the lake. And we really actually don't leave our zone. I mean, we're within a probably, okay, I'm a runner, so I run further out, but let's say a 5-kilometer radius, and we do most of that by foot or on bike. And to me, that's also a sign of a successful community where you have enough amenities there that, yeah, okay, maybe on the weekend you want to get out and go do something different, but for the most part, you can stay in one space. This whole concept of regenerative is, instead of this whole way that we've been building before, which is, bulldoze it, build it, design it to pack in as many houses as humanly possible for the maximum profit. This is, well, no, how do we balance that so that we're actually regenerating our land, creating a positive impact on our environment, but also addressing the very real requirement for housing around the world that's only growing. So balancing those things out. And of course, the financial model is quite tricky, because now it's not just build it, sell it, we're out, see you later. It's build it, sell it, operate these parts of it, keep a consistent cash flow. And what does that model look like? And what flexibility does it give us? And, what we're learning is the flexibility that it gives us at a certain scale is it gives us the ability to subsidize housing for people who maybe would not otherwise afford to be able to live there, but can provide a service or can work in the community or can deliver value to be a part of the community where it makes sense. And that I'm really excited about, because that's true regeneration. It's not this segregated model we have today of, socioeconomic segregation, which, also becomes race segregation, which also becomes, all these other
gender, etc., etc. And I guess what you're describing is really fundamentally a shift to a well-being economy. And it's still that you want that community to thrive and make money, but it's how does that money make the community thrive? Has everyone got access to school right up to 16? Can they? Because there's the big fear at the moment, I'm going to get this stat wrong, but I know they're saying that something like 70% of the world's population are going to move to urban environments by 2050. Now that's quite scary.
Yeah.
Because essentially it's like, well, we haven't got the infrastructure there. What we then lose is all the knowledge and the passion and the land and the agriculture. So how can we, I guess what's exciting about it is how can we show to people, like you say, that when you live in a space where you're happy and you're content, and that means lots of things to lots of different people, but strip all of that back, you can thrive. But of course, the global economy doesn't want that.
Yeah, it's a dicey situation. I mean, I can tell you the project that I had 13 years ago, and just for the sake of relationships, I will not call out exactly where it was, but we had investors on board. We had huge celebrity endorsement. We had the land. It was conditional on getting the zoning, the area rezoned. We were very excited about this because the business plan that we developed actually, one of the problems in this area, like anywhere in, the southwest United States, is the droughts and the extreme fires that happen, which are devastating, not just for those local regions, but for the global environment, because all of the toxins and all of the, CO2 just goes up into the air. And that's not a, hey, it's a localized event. This is, we're a sphere. It goes everywhere. So it was super disappointing because we thought we had this most brilliant business plan and we could not get the government on side. So the difference that I had this time is we went to government first. We very much said, we need to have government on side. We need your buy-in. It still has been a road, let me tell you. But now there's reception. There's an openness of finding solutions and considering other ways. And we really look at it like we're trying to solve a few different challenges. We've got multiple challenges. We've got a food challenge, a housing challenge. We'll have more and more of an energy challenge.
Yeah.
I lived in California, where you have a very condensed area with a very heavily populated, very heavily populated zone, where people have 3-4 cars. They have, huge houses. They have pools. They have the energy demands for that is ridiculous.
Insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and so trying to solve these problems for that, and rolling power outages. Sorry. Where in the summertime, when everybody's running their air conditioning and it's 40-45 degrees outside and it's hot, you need your air conditioning on, or you want to be in your pool, and the power goes out. Well, then what? So
even hearing that feels such a luxury. It's like it's not a problem per se, but it's how we feel that's a problem. So actually, if your aircon breaks and your pool isn't at the right temperature, if you're 50% of the world's population, you're like going, what, is that really a problem?
Right. So we talked about the global south, and maybe let's go back there, because I think that's a very, very interesting point. I truly believe that the global south is what can save us. I think there's a huge, need, of course, for the Western world, North America, Europe, to curb our usage of energy, to curb our consumption. But at the same time, I think that we have done an absolute disservice to the global south of how we've treated the land, how we've treated the extraction of raw materials so that we can live this luxurious lifestyle, because it truly is luxurious.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and this is going to sound very strange, but at the same time, it's a huge benefit that they have not gone down the development path that we have. Because now we have an opportunity, perhaps, to do this the right way and guide that development the right way, where we are thinking more sustainably. We are thinking about regeneration of the land. We are not encumbered by the massive amounts of infrastructure there, but we're actually, able to really create something special. And I think, I hope, our vision is to move that direction once we have kind of tested everything that we're doing in the markets that we know.
Yeah.
But I really believe that our future is in developing that area in the right way, and I should say, helping the local governments and the local people to develop in the right way. And that means, bringing back agricultural prosperity that doesn't really exist there now. But it could, you keep hearing this term, Africa is the world's breadbasket. Well, it absolutely could be. And it could actually be a very critical one for us if we can start getting back in and planting and regreening. Yeah. So, and there are many, many companies that are doing that. One of them is a Dutch company that I know fairly well, called Just Dig It. And what they're doing is so simple, but the impact that they're having in such a short time frame in many countries in Africa is phenomenal. And that was actually a big part of what inspired me to go back down this path, because I thought, wow, if they can do that in just a few years in Africa, where, most of the time when you think of Africa, you think of desert or big open drought plain areas. Yeah. And I'm seeing these pictures of these hugely lush, green, wonderful areas. To me, that creates hope and an opportunity for us to really make an impact. And it is possible. But it is going to take a small global army.
Yeah, and I think the key to what you were saying there, I guess, with a lot of this is about empowerment, isn't it? And actually, if we can build these kind of well-being, regenerative communities, what we've got to be really careful of, haven't we, from a West's point of view, is telling them how to develop, and we've made all these mistakes, so only do it this way. And because it must be really difficult if you're sat on all these natural assets that could help you thrive just like the rest of the world, and you go, well, hold on a minute, you can't tap into that. So I think it'd be really interesting when you start to complete these communities and share actually how the economic models are working, not just from a numbers in the bank point of view. And I think that's the thing that I think COVID gave us all a nice slap in the face, was like, oh, I quite like this. I quite like being in my zone. No, I'm not saying confined to a small space in a flat on the third floor,
That part
because
was
that
not
wasn't
good.
fun. That was not fun. But actually, what matters, what makes people happy?
Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of us really did that reset of, I know for myself, this whole homeschooling thing was like, oh my God, really? I need to play teacher now. And my industry, construction in California did not stop. So we were still full on. And now I have 2 kids at home. And luckily my husband and I kind of figured out a way to balance that out. But, all of a sudden we had all this time with them, and we were scheduling morning walks, and we were very lucky. We had a huge field in front of our house, and it overgrew, of course, because they were not sending out maintenance people. So we had these little, pretend expeditions going out and looking for ladybugs, and just, we created activities that were away from the computer, because during the day they were spending so much time on the computer doing their homeschooling.
Yeah.
And so we created stuff. And I actually, it's interesting for me how many people just absolutely look back at that time as a horrible experience. I had the complete opposite. I really actually enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the uncertainty around it, but I really took that as, wow, I can actually spend time at home with my kids and create little adventures and do things. We were doing yoga together as a family. I don't think we've been able to do that very much since. We had, every other day little family yoga routines. Yeah. So that, and unfortunately here we are again 3 years later, back in our offices, back in the same sort of grind. And we have to be very careful not to do that. But the other thing is, I was thinking about this with the regenerative community side of things. If you look at the reality of the situation, we're not really given viable other options. If you work in London, for example, well, you're not going to go and live way out in the countryside and have a 2.5-hour trek to get into your office. If you're so lucky that you can remote work, then no problem. But the options that we have for how we live are so limited, and they're so structured and so confined. I'm going to share a very funny fact that I learned from very recently while I was in the US that I never knew. This whole concept of planned community and living over here and working over there and commuting actually gained momentum because of Rockefeller. And if you know anything about the Rockefeller family, their biggest investments and assets were in oil and gas. Right. So this whole concept actually originated from an economic driver to sell more gas and to basically get people to living in one side and commuting to another to go to their jobs. So, and the entire world is living this way. I mean, it's so now I'm looking at this. Well, maybe we have an opportunity to reverse that and say, okay, well, because now, of course, there's this mad panic, and it's like somebody turned the lights on with climate change this year, because last year, there was, and then all of a sudden, every government, every organization, all the investment groups, everybody's like, we need to do something about this climate change thing. And you have people that have been in this for 20, 30 years going, well, yeah, we've been saying that for a while now. And now there's this mad panic to change things. And I really believe that changing how we live and how we think about planned communities and living is an absolute key to our ability to survive going forward. And the other thing we're losing, as you mentioned before, we're losing this huge knowledge base of agricultural people, the people that really know the old way and the way of proper agriculture. They're dying out. And I mean proper meaning before all the industrial ag took over, because it sort of was 50s, 60s, industrial ag really started coming in and taking over. And those people that were still farming in the old way in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they're dying out. So we need to capture that knowledge and capture that skill set. And luckily, there's a lot of people working on this, working in that. so that we make farming cool again. And I know that sounds super cheesy, but I mean, what some of my fondest memories were as a little girl in my parents' garden. You know, my mother would be like, okay, we need 3 carrots and this and
Yeah.
this. And I would run out and I would go and get in the dirt and grab the stuff. And I loved that. And I'm a horrible gardener, but we also don't have the space for it in our garden. But my kids don't have that. And my dream is that, you know, before they've grown up and left the house, that they can experience that connection with the earth and that connection with our food. And we've lost that. We've lost that in this very convenient supermarket world.
Yeah, and I think there's a key word there. It's connection. It's connectivity to food, to nature, to all of these things that essentially keep us alive and sustain us. Because back to your point about Los Angeles, it's 24 hours a day. I can get whatever fruit, it doesn't have to be seasonal. You know, and I think it's that tussle, isn't it? It's like this romantic vision of going back to the old days. And like me as a little girl, I live in my granddad's home now, and would go into the garden and get the runner beans and the tomatoes and the potatoes, but just the taste sensation of something grown at home versus me going to the supermarket is like mind-blowingly just amazing. So it's like and again, that idyllic vision of a community where you don't need every house with a lawnmower, for example. You need a community hut that's essentially got all the kit the whole village needs. You kind of use it and you kind of maintain it and all of those sorts of things, and places for young people to go and hang and do what they want to do, and, you know, cause trouble and kind of break the rules and all of that, but a space where they're heard and listened to. And I think we've lost all of that, I think, as well, haven't we, along the way?
Yeah, we lost that sense of community. And I think part of it has to do with us all being so busy. And part of it has to be with just how communities have been designed. I mean, again, they've been designed from a socioeconomic perspective. And if I think about my friends, well, you know, just my own friend group, well, not everybody's making the same amount of money. And, you know, I would love to have a community that I had my 20 closest friends in one place. And it was just, hey, my kids are there, your kids are there. I mean, that to me, that would just be absolute heaven. And it shouldn't be about the socioeconomic side of it, but it is. But we've also, you know, of course, we have all this technology coming in, and there's a point where technology is wonderful. I mean, we would not be in so many different places, including what we're doing in circularity, where we are without technology. That's just a reality of it. At the same time, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because we've lost that. We've gone so far in the tech direction that we've lost that connection with nature, and we're losing that connection with each other. I mean, you really have to make an effort to connect with people.
Yes.
More so, I would say, in the United States, and specifically, of course, Los Angeles, where I know very well, than Europe, where it's a little bit more, you know, I live in a small town, everybody kind of knows each other. You walk down the street, hi. But that was, for me, like the most incredible thing in the world. Wow, like I'm recognized. And, you know, like in LA, it's just people are blinders on, they're there to do their thing, get out and move on to the next task. And that's unfortunate, because we've created this monster of the society.
We have.
So my vision and my hope for the regenerative community side of things is we can not only reestablish that connection with nature, but also reestablish that connection with each other, and actually be in a community environment where it's supportive. And I'm very different in this mindset. You know, I'm not looking at building a bunch of tiny homes. I totally respect and admire the people that are, but I could never live in one. I know that. Just as much as I respect and appreciate the people that are doing, you know, kibbutzes and communes and things like that. Very different mindset, but there's this missing component of having the luxuries that we've all grown accustomed to, but doing it in the right way where you don't feel like you're sacrificing. And that's my vision for
Yeah. Well, listen, Jennifer, I'm sure we could talk about this for ages, and I would love to get you back on in the future, when hopefully we can probably bring to life more about one of the communities that you've built, how it's worked, what you've learned, what went really well, what didn't. But yeah, it's been an absolute thrill to have you on, Jennifer, and thanks for kind of sharing your passions and your visions for both what you do at WerkWell and all the other projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here, and I would love to come back and share more when the communities are moving along. sooner than later, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And just sorry to listeners, there's been a bit of a sound dip in and out every now and again, but I've made sure everything's been captured that's been important. So, yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer, and I will speak to you soon.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Road and Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.